the perspectives can come from anywhere. So as a leader, your first responsibility is to trap the perspective. I call it sushi-bytes, right?
Yeah.
So you learn for a week and you try and apply and see if you're able to apply. But there's no point doing something for 2 months to realize that you can apply the first part of it. So, you take something for a week, understand it. A leader's job is power of AI and Gen AI, your legacy to modernization. Legacy modernization is a far faster process.
Okay.
This wasn't possible earlier.
Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. I'm your host, Yatin Naik, business head at HT Smartcast, and I'm thrilled to bring to you a new series of episodes on leadership, focused on AI or artificial intelligence. In this series, we will delve into the rapidly evolving world of artificial intelligence and its impact on business leadership. In today's episode, we explore how generative AI or Gen AI is driving digital transformation. To answer that and more, we are joined by Sanjay Menon, Managing Director at Publicis Sapient India. Sanjay is responsible for driving the strategy, capability development, and growth of Publicis Sapient in India and maintain its stature as key global hub of the company's distributed delivery network. Welcome to Leadership Lessons.
Oh, thank you, Yatin. Appreciate the invite. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks. Sanjay, you've been working on digital transformation projects for a long time now, right? For your own company as well as for clients. Now there is a new kid on the block, AI, artificial intelligence. Are you inspired or intimidated?
Great question. See, I think, Yatin, to start with, AI has been around for a very, very long time, right? So if you go back right from when Turing's, machine from the Second World War onwards, there's been the part about applied intelligence, artificial intelligence, whichever way you look at it. I think what's happened now is with the technology, the change in technology, with the breakthrough kind of levels of compute that are available, the ability to process data and come up with intelligence is suddenly, started to undergo a lot more step changes. And with the ChatGPT 3.5 kind of really took the world by storm in terms of what are the possibilities. So if you now look at in the space of transformation, so this is an interesting kind of, it's kind of the converging of two different things that are going to, I think, create a far more explosive effect. Transformation was also going through the same kind of story arc that everyone's been transforming since time immemorial, right?
True.
Just that earlier we transformed in spans of millennia, which then became hundreds of years, became decades, and now it's become much shorter because of, again, the power of technology, consumer expectations, really the power of the possible. So businesses, as they have looked to transform, because of either who their competitor sets are, who the consumer expectation is, and what they can actually create for the consumers leveraging technology. Now that also has got fueled by what are the possibilities using artificial intelligence, right?
Right.
So what we're seeing right now is that it is absolutely a point of inspiration, but I think it's a great question you asked because inspiration is something that comes from what you understand. And if you don't understand it, it becomes intimidation because then, it's the same with every change, right? That lack of information always leads to intimidation or change. And the way you get inspired by change is by the information about the context and the possibilities and the why and the how. So what we're seeing with clients as we work with them is that we're investing a lot more time for them to understand what could be the possibilities. Same for ourselves as well, because we have to do that for ourselves and we have to help our clients kind of transform. So it's inspiring because I think we're realizing the context of what is happening. But also keep in mind that we're still at the very early stages of even trying to realize, what the potential can be and what it will be. Because if you go back to technologies like the internet and everything else, which I think was the last big change that happened, the initial few years were very underwhelming before the world realized the possibilities of what the internet could do. The initial one was more like a publishing platform, as you and I were just talking about earlier, right? It's about, we can now instead of publishing a hard brochure, you now have it on your website. But the fact that you could bank on the internet, you could do commerce on the internet, those came a little later, and those were the real unlock. So similarly, I think how companies will transform leveraging AI, I think we're at the very early stages of it. But we'll definitely see a big upswing in how companies will realize the value from it.
No, true, absolutely. And therefore, it will also have impact on leadership, right? The question, therefore, is that in this new age of AI, how is leadership going to change? What are the new tenets of leadership that you think are going to evolve?
Yeah, no, I think it's it's either back to your earlier one, it's either a very inspiring time to be a leader or it's a very intimidating time to be a leader.
Absolutely.
Because I think you've got to first start with saying, what does it mean to lead, right? So if a lot of people think about leading as literally that is a physical manifestation, which is that I'm in front. I'm in front, which means figuratively, I'm the smartest. I know the most. It's my job to give everybody an answer. So if you flip that frame for a second and say that this is the way I've always looked at leadership, right? Mm-hmm. Leadership is a responsibility. It's not a title. And your responsibility is to ensure success. Whether the success, you're the biggest kind of, protagonist in it or someone else's doesn't matter. So I keep telling a leader's job is not to answer every question. It is to ensure that every question is answered.
Okay, interesting.
So if you now look at that frame and you look at what's happening in the world, I think today we're in a knowledge economy, right? That's been forever. But in the world that we're now progressing towards, it is going to be two things. One, the perspectives can come from anywhere. So as a leader, your first responsibility is to trap the perspective. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you first generate perspective? Your first thing is you create a culture where it is okay to experiment. Because if you look at the world of AI and what's happening right now, no one knows anything definitively. No one can say, I'm an expert, because everybody is learning almost at the same time. Maybe someone is 5 minutes ahead of the others, but everybody is learning largely. So which means you have to first create a culture of experimentation where everybody is creating perspective.
Right.
Once you're creating perspective, you're also creating this thing that how do you trap that perspective irrespective of where it comes from? So as a leader, first thing you have to think about, therefore, is that who do I learn from? And I might learn from anywhere in the organization. So I'm almost a 360-degree learner. Mm-hmm. So concepts like reverse mentoring, etc., which have been, I think, words that have been used in the past, I think right now are most relevant in the context because that knowledge can come from anywhere, that perspective can come from anywhere. Mm-hmm. The culture of experimentation, I think, is going to be definitely a big one. The third one is a culture of collaboration. Because I don't think, the world is no longer solving complicated problems. The power of something like AI or as we transform is going to be able to solve complex problems. So the way I differentiate complicated versus complex is, let's say you're trying to put together a Ferrari, right? Mm-hmm. It's a complicated process, but there is a manual by which you can put together a Ferrari, right? It may have 2,500 parts or something. It may take you days, months, years, but you can put it together. It's a very definitive process. You start from A and you get to B. But let's say you're trying to solve pollution in Delhi. That's a complex problem because there are multiple variables. And all those variables, the way they interact with each other keeps changing over time. So all you do is you form a hypothesis, you try something, it works, you do more of it, stops working, you try something else. So similarly, no one person, I think, is going to have the answers to complex problems. So teams will have answers to complex problems. So how do you create a culture of collaboration that someone else may ideate, someone else may build on it, then someone else may build on it, but how do you create that network through which you get teams to start to create that perspective? I think that's going to be really an important role of a leader. The other one, which I think is the most important one, is lead by example. Lead by example by being comfortable to and being vulnerable to be a learner.
Yeah.
Because I feel a lot of leaders are caught up in a mental stature of themselves, which is, I can't admit that I don't know because then people will stop regarding me or they will judge me for being, an imposter who became senior without knowing. So I think as a leader, if you're very comfortable and you're showing, and this is what we do, at Publicis Sapient, is that each person is like, I'm on a journey. We publish our own learning journey to our colleagues in this thing, saying, here's what I'm learning. Here's what I'm excited about. Mm-hmm. Here's where I'm trying this in my personal life, in my professional life, in personal capacity. And this is what we're trying as an organization. So what it creates is, it creates a very, I wouldn't say fully stress-free, but a largely de-stressed environment to learn. I think that is the biggest role a leader can play today. So how do you enable everybody to change, including themselves, and they themselves showing that they are changing? Mm-hmm. I think people look for those signals because the minute people say, look here, if everybody's talking about it, but they're only expecting only one segment of the organization to do it, then no one starts doing it, right? They're like, okay, it's not as real. So whereas everybody starts doing it and they see the leaders doing it, I think that's a big change.
Yeah, and I was reading this, what you mentioned is that everybody has a learning path, right, defined, including all the leaders, which as you say, is transferable to the rest of the organization, which is quite fascinating, right? But how's the journey been? As in, is it something which is working? Is it still a work in progress?
See, I think this is always work in progress, right? I mean, as the analogy I would give is, it's like the difference between wellness and dieting,
Right.
Dieting is a finite journey. So you say I'm going to drop 10 kilos or 5 kilos or whatever, right? And you start to put a plan that gets you there, whether it's running, eating, whatever it may be, right? Everybody's got their own ways to do it. And then the day you hit that target, you declare victory, which is why most diets don't work. Because mentally, when you declare victory, you feel that now it's back to whatever I need it to be, right? Because my project is over. Wellness is your every day finding ways to be healthy. You say, okay, for the next 1 month, I will skip breakfast and see what happens to me. For another month, or I'll just drink maybe green tea, right? And then see if that helps. If it does, I'll do more of it. Otherwise, I'll stop doing it. Let me try walking. Let me try playing.
Right.
But what you've mentally agreed to with yourself, this is a journey. I'll just keep trying different things. But so similarly, I think right now, we'll always be work in progress because because AI or anything around it is not a finite set of knowledge you to gain. It is something that will keep changing as you're learning. So what we have to get, so we talk about the fact that can you learn, unlearn, and relearn in continuous loops. So for us, as we looked at when we hire people, we obviously place emphasis on expertise, and that's important. There's no question about that. We place as much emphasis now on learnability because it doesn't matter what you know today. It's a guarantee that in the next 2 to 3 years, you will be doing a bit of a reset on it.
Right.
So I think how do you get into this perpetual process of learning and applying and then being very comfortable to unlearn from it is, I think, the journey.
Yeah. So if I were to ask you, what are you learning today?
Yeah. So I think, it's a great question, right? So I've been learning prompt engineering.
Okay.
And learning that because, I'm not a technologist by education. I'm a technologist by application over the years, right? So it's how do I become a good prompt engineer? Because that's more conceptual. It's logic, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's something that I feel will help me then leverage the AI tools. See, because I feel the world is going to have two kinds of people broadly. I mean, I'm obviously oversimplifying it. There'll be one category of people or one segment of people who will build what the world will use.
Okay.
And the other much larger segment of the world will be the smart users of that. So if you're not going to be the one who's building those tools, platforms, enablers, you have to educate yourself to becoming, how will I become a smarter user of that in my current context as well as in the context that changes. So I'm looking at saying, okay, my first journey is how do I become a smart user? And then by passion or, maybe at some point, if I can start to be someone who can enable or, build some part of the other one, that'll be great. But currently, I think we all have a responsibility of becoming smart users. So my journey is there. So through prompt engineering, understanding what are the various models, what's the ecosystem of AI, Gen AI, how does it work? Large language models, small language models. What's almost the business context in which they're, valuable? That's the journey I at least started with. And then as you're doing, you're also figuring out, more things that one can apply. My one learning has been, it is unlike, where we earlier, we went for courses that were 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Now you're going to learn something.
Bite-sized, right?
I call it sushi-bytes, right?
Yeah.
So you learn for a week.
True.
And you try and apply and see if you're able to apply. But there's no point doing something for 2 months to realize that you can apply the first part of it. So, you take something for a week, understand it, apply it, and then kind of build on it. And that's the journey I see.
Absolutely interesting. So I'm going to change track here a bit and come to more business questions. Now, as you work with different digital transformation projects, especially with your clients, what are the changes in the briefs that now you're getting, especially now AI coming into the picture? What is a sense on that? As in, can you just tell us about what are the new things that you guys are working on, or what are the new trends coming about?
Sure. I think it's at a couple of different levels, right?
Right.
So one is, I'd say the orientation is one of curiosity. And the curiosity, I think now is not at a phase where tell me what Gen AI is. I think that was the last maybe 6 months, 12 months back. Now it's about help me understand how can you manifest it in my context, and what are the various things we can start to do, experiments, but it's really to figure out, curiosity. I think that's the number one. So, for example, we worked with a large hospitality major, right? And this is not just, this was more than just an experiment. We actually helped them move from your regular search that you have on, let's say if you're going for a vacation, right? What's the first thing that we have to do is we have to choose a place. Because if you look at most hotel websites or any of the travel listings, it's predicated on where you want to go.
Right.
If let's say I decide I want to go to Phuket. In Phuket, what I want to do, I can find out more. But I'm predicated that I've got to pick a place and then figure out what kind of a holiday do I want. So what we helped this hospitality major move to is intent-based. Because that's how we as consumers have always wanted to search. So now I can search by saying, family of 3, we've got a pet dog, we like living in houses, close to the beach, not very cold weather. We've got a week in October.
Right.
Where should I go? Right? And
Like a recommendation.
And a budget thing as well. So it will tell you now properties, places across the world in your budget that meet your criteria. So now you're locked into a place based on your intent and not the other way around, right? So that's a possibility that's happened only because of the amount of compute that can happen and kind of surfacing all of that.
True.
So that's coming from the curiosity, hey, what can we do differently in our current context? The other thing that's also we're seeing from our clients is the fact that, and this is more, I think, where we're helping them realize that, see, at the end of the day, your ability to leverage AI in a more powerful way is predicated on the organization having more connected intelligence. So, over the last couple of decades, a lot of companies have invested in data, right? Either data collection, data storage, data warehouse, all of that, right? But I think the one thing that a lot of companies haven't done is create connected intelligence. That are all these data sets talking to each other, and how do I get the power of the multivariate relations? So we're also helping our clients make the journey saying you have the first order of business is also as much getting your plumbing sorted. Because if you get the data plumbing right, then when you apply compute on it. So for example, if I'm a retailer, and if I have different data sets about my consumers, whether I have my second party data, third party data, I have my other some other kind of, I have my warehousing data, I have so many other data sets. But now if I look at all this together in a more connected manner, and I say, okay, if I have to look at making these kind of business choices in the future on these kind of product sets, how should I look at my entire warehousing strategy? And which kind of consumer segment should I go after? Now you're getting a far more powerful thing. That instead of just saying, what's my typical transportation pattern and where should I open? So now you can make a choice on segment, product, and this thing in a more joined up way because that data is more connected. So what we're trying to look at is, so that's a conversation we're having with our clients. So I think the transformation, I'd say intent is absolutely the same. I think the starting point is a lot more data first. And the orientation is curiosity about, okay, let's try some use cases, but real use cases, and not just about, can I get my email smarter and can I become more productive? So that's something that's happening. The other thing which is related to this, but is different, is also around change management at the more organizational level, which is to, the first question that you asked around inspiration and intimidation, that change management, and also starting with management teams. How do they make the journey? Because this is one of the things where everybody is curious, but the first question we always hear from a lot of clients is, how do I get started? What's a good place to start? How do we start as a management team engaging in this space in a more purposeful manner? So that when we are having conversations with our teams, we're not just telling them this is something that the whole world is excited about, but we have a more personal opinion on why am I excited about it? And what are the possibilities for the business? So it's at a few different levels. There's a change management aspect, there is a curiosity to experiment aspect, and then I think there's a where does the journey start, which is a lot more data first. I think when you're data first in the near term, you will be AI led in the medium term.
True.
Because I think that's a sequence at least we're seeing how that can apply.
True. No, absolutely true. Any unique use cases coming up that were possibly not there before?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So see the use cases. So there's two things, right? So one is use cases in terms of what it would look like to, let's say, do something. So let's take a more concrete example. A lot of the incumbents, when I say incumbents, the larger firms that were winning and now are trying to kind of keep up and figure out how do they keep abreast with the pace of change.
Legacy.
Correct. One of their big constraining factors was the fact of their legacy systems.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how, it's a bit like turning an ocean liner around. It doesn't matter how hard you hit the wheel, the liner will take the time it's going to take to turn around. And that's frustrating to watch at some level, right? Now with the power of AI and Gen AI, your legacy to modernization, modernization is a far faster process.
Oh, okay.
This wasn't possible earlier. So what was earlier many, many years is now just potentially a couple of years. I mean, that's what we're doing with a few of our clients is how do we help you almost jumpstart your legacy modernization? Because when you modernize your legacy, what it opens up is now a whole plethora of possibilities that you can make real. Otherwise, those are just possibilities. But the first question someone's going to ask you is, are you ready? Are you re-engineered at the core to make that possibility real? So that's, I think, one use case of what can happen. I think the other thing that's starting to happen is, if you look at a lot of the initial use cases of AI, it reminds me of, even as we talked about transformation in the early days, we said, look, your transformation is about the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. And this has been, I think one of the professors at MIT, if I'm not mistaken, but I might be misquoting. So the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, not just becoming a faster caterpillar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's a time
So today when you see a lot of the initial use cases of UI, it is the faster caterpillar.
True.
And our assertion is that, look here, it's not about further automation, it's about reimagination.
Right.
But I think the reimagination takes a level of trust and confidence before you're ready to really say, okay, can I think about this very, very differently? So if you look at what's possible in the space of drug discovery, how should a company think about itself? Because now the various other things that are possible, right? You have banks that want to, behave like travel companies because of the wealth of data that they have. So, can you reimagine who you are is going to be, I think, for us, the big unlock from it. But currently, the curiosity factor is leading to a lot more of the faster caterpillars at this stage. And that's okay. Maybe it's a rite of passage. But I think,
do you also see this having an impact in terms of how leadership or management takes decisions about?
I think you do see kind of two different approaches to this.
Right.
So because what's happening is where you have a level of confidence, like the legacy modernization, people say, okay,
right.
I think I've done a proof of concept, I've done a use case, so now let's go to the, let's kind of go to the races, right? And the other ones are, okay, let's try more. Show me that it works. So you have, instead of kicking off large programs, people are looking for the validation piece a lot more. So you are seeing people aren't just signing up, multi-million dollar, multi-year deals necessarily on this. It's a lot more of, let's see what we get to the next 3 to 6 months. So it also means we have to have the ability to work with our clients to manifest those validations in very short time frames. So you can't say, but the validation itself is going to take 6 months because, so the validation has to happen in the matter of a few weeks for you to then get the confidence of then kicking off a multi-year program. The reason you can't have a validation program that runs into months is because there's also an overarching sense that, look here, it's changing so rapidly that the windows of opportunity are small. So I have to be ready to monetize and, take share from a business standpoint as well. So which is why we are seeing the kind of smaller validation programs. And then, definitely, businesses wanting to then get into the larger, show me the unlock from this that I can scale.
So I think
that scale will take
experimentation, I think, has become the foundation, it's become a buzzword, but especially it's now getting far more integrated into many of the decision-making processes. So I think to that extent, but that again leads me to one more thought, is that, so therefore, what does, from a leader's point of view, what are the skills, 2 or 3 very critical skills that are coming to fore? What do you think are those?
See, I think, interestingly, I feel we're reaching an era now, or maybe we already are in one, where we're back to the core skills that, people call soft skills or something, maybe a couple of decades back, as being really, because, look at the Harvard study that said, what are the attributes of the future? They came up with resiliency and ideation. And that's very interesting, right? Otherwise people look at hard skills and other things. So grit or resiliency is one of the things that have been talked about. So as a leader, I think the leaders, one of the key attributes right now, which is to the fore, is your ability to foster experimentation at scale.
And fail.
And knowing that you will fail, but not letting that stress come into the system. Right. Because the minute, it's a very interesting dichotomy. Experiment at scale cannot coexist with fear of failure. At the same time, you need someone at the helm who's ensuring that all of this finally is also going to go somewhere, because you just can't have chaos or just everybody experimenting and failing and the system not learning from it.
Right.
So I think so how do you kind of, have that level of, leadership visioning and understanding where you can create an environment where you allow experimentation at scale and yet there is a way in which you're harvesting the good from it. I think the other one is if you've got experimentation at scale, if you're dependent on so much of diversity of talent and everything that's going on, it's going to come down to human inspiration, which comes down to empathy. So I think empathy, I feel, is a highly underrated factor that is going to be extremely important for leaders as you move forward now, because we're definitely going to be in an era where it's not going to be about templatizing and just scaling very quickly things that are templatized. You actually have to create an ability to scale and yet be very contextual to what you're solving. Because I don't think it's going to be about solving it once and just, then, applying it a million times. You will have a certain template or a certain frame, but you'll apply it in every context, which means you need a human ecosystem that works, and therefore empathy and how do you connect, how do you inspire people, I think is going to be, from a leadership standpoint, again, I think an attribute that I feel, so a leader being more accessible, a leader being more empathetic, all of those things are going to be key, because you can't have a leader who's isolated, who's kind of, in his or her ivory tower, kind of just, providing general direction. Because general direction of, earlier if you set a direction for 5 to 10 years, that era is over now. Now everybody's in the trenches kind of figuring out the next 6 to 12 months and where we go.
That's interesting. And when I talk to a lot of people, especially people who are in the leadership positions, I find that somewhere along, there are two types. One who are extremely enthusiastic about the tech and the AI and what they can, have a very optimistic point of view. One can usually what one calls as boomers,
Yeah.
And then there are the doomers, okay, who are skeptical and generally, talk more about things that can go wrong with these kind of developments. When you advise your clients, I'm sure a lot of them come with different kind of problem statements. What are some of the pitfalls that you advise them not to get into? Mindsets that they need to be.
Well, I think it's a great question, yeah. And in fact, just on the what you started with, I was reminded of this quote, and of course, I think always feel war is a bad example or an analogy, but in this one, it fits into that, which says, a pessimistic general has never won a war, right? So the only thing that creates great things in the world is optimism. So you can see which side of the spectrum I'm kind of anchored in. But having said that, I think whenever we work with our clients in any of the contexts, the things that we always highlight for them is that where is the potential value unlock, what we call value pools? At the same time, what are the consideration sets you have to be aware of, right? And consideration can come from a few different things. For example, if you're in a highly regulated industry or not, if you're leveraging AI, then let's understand the ethical use of AI. Do we understand the sources of our data? Are we going to be transparent about the use of AI? Are we safeguarding any of the risks that may be contextual to the environment, to the industry, right? Are you sensitized to the culture of your organization?
Right.
Are you sensitized to the structure of your organization? So here is the upsides that we can create, but here are the consideration set that we have to be aware of. Not everything has to be a regulatory risk, but we've seen that a lot of times people underestimate the power of change internally that's needed, and everybody loves the upside that's possible, and then you falter the first step. So we kind of make sure both are equally visible, but it's always about playing for the upside, right? At the end of the day, businesses exist to grow and thrive. So we have to talk about what the upside is, but we are equally responsible to make sure that we are talking about the consideration sets that may come in the way. Sometimes it could be the way they're configured from a system standpoint, right? The systems may not allow them to play for the upside. The culture may not allow them to play for the upside. The regulations that they're in and the data sets and this thing and how confident are we of the data and how AI is going to manifest, maybe a consideration set for us to take care of. So the idea is to make both of them visible, but you're definitely always playing for the boomers, right? I mean, that's the orientation, right? I mean, that's how the world gets to be a bigger and better place.
No, true, absolutely. I mean, especially when we talk, CEOs by definition have to be optimists and have to be in the boomer camp. So sometimes you can get that kind of view. Great talking to you, Sanjay. Really some interesting nuggets. If you have to just point out three things as a leader or or AI that will impact, say, leadership of the future? What would those be?
I'd say the first one is, as a leader, as an individual, get curious.
Okay.
Get curious, because there is a lot more that will be discovered and is yet to be discovered. So you have to be curious if you have to learn. Second, you have to have absolutely no shame in learning from anything and everyone. So don't assume knowledge will only come from one direction, which is from the top. It's going to come from anywhere around you. So keep your eyes and ears open.
Absolutely.
So if you're curious and you know that you will, learning can come from anywhere. Third is apply. That
Experiment.
Apply, experiment. So be part of the movement. Don't see as someone who is orchestrating a movement, right? I think that, to me, those three things, I think if a leader can look to imbibe, I feel they have a better chance of just being more valuable and impactful in the times to come.
Awesome. Thank you. Pleasure meeting you.
Likewise, Yatin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas in your mind on how to lead in an AI-driven world. This is Yatin signing off.